Hello, I'm Robert, voluntary fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. And this is just to put in context what's happening in the Middle East. So we hear mainly, certainly in the United Kingdom, United States and places like that, we hear almost entirely the Israeli perspective on what's going on. And I just want to give you a slightly different perspective because this helps you understand and be less scared, because you can understand what the Iran itself wants and what the rest of the Middle East wants. So the Israelis' perspective, as we are given it, is that Israeli sees themselves as having a right to have nuclear weapons in the Middle East that they don't have to disclose to anyone. So they don't tell the IAEA where they are, what they've got or anything. They don't tell them they've got them. And Israel's point of view on this matter is that nobody else in the Middle East has any right to have nuclear weapons, and they will, if necessary, go to war to stop any other country from having nuclear weapons, and only they have the right to have them. And that is the narrative that they just expect everyone else to agree with. And I just want to show us a slightly different perspective here. Indeed, here's the perspective of every other country in the world except the United States abstains on it, and a couple of others. So and this is just to help you to understand Iran better. I'm not trying to come into this politically, but to just help you understand Iran better and be less scared. So if you look at this map, then see a little red, you might be able to see a little red, let's see, I click on this, I think you can see the mouse, little red spot just there, just above that, you might be able to see it, depending whether it's high enough resolution. That's Israel. That little red spot is Israel. So every year, Israel is the only no vote to the votes for a nuclear weapons-free Middle East. All the countries in blue vote yes. That includes all the Middle East countries around it. They all vote for a nuclear weapon-free Middle East. Almost all of Africa, Europe, almost everyone in the country. The ones in yellow abstain. So it's Cameroon, Argentina, and the United States. They abstain. And then the ones in blue, they just didn't vote last time. I don't know if they just weren't there or what was the reason, but that was the last vote that there was on this matter. It comes up every year, and Israel is the only no vote to it. So this is some perspective to have here, that if Israel was to immediately say, they're going to disclose all their nukes, and then they're going to very rapidly, over say a decade, eliminate them, then nobody else in the region would want nukes, and they would the Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone would then be established. That's what everyone else wants. And it's clearly that Israel feels that they're a small country and they're hemmed in by lots of other countries that are all Muslim, and they just want to be safe. But I don't think anyone would tangle with. You've got peace treaties with all their neighbours now. They are extremely powerful in terms of conventional capabilities. I don't think Israel needs nukes to be safe anymore. So why don't they just give them up? If they do, then Iran will give them up too. Won't have any interest in them. So this is the perspective, I think. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but maybe in a few years, decade or so, as tensions get less, then Israel may decide, well, maybe it can be safe without nukes. Once it does that, we'll have a nuclear weapon-free Middle East. Simple as that. So that's the perspective, that's the broader perspective of all this. Now, I'm going to look at some other things. So I don't think I've done a map. Yes, I've done a map for this. Did I? That's the establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone. That's the Middle East. That's what I've just done. Now, this is the one about countries in India, which is a country that's got nuclear weapons, but few people seem to realise that India does not want the world to have nukes. So it's different from Israel. It's not saying that everyone else should have nukes. Everyone else should be nuke-free. It's saying it wants to get rid of its nukes as quickly as possible, as long as the rest of the world will join in. And most people don't know this, but China has the same view. Every year, there's There's another of these votes every year in the General Assembly, and they vote to prohibit all nukes, to have a convention where all the countries come together and they work out a way to eliminate all nukes as quickly as possible. And every year, India and China vote for that. And when you look at this one, the main exceptions are in the north, NATO countries and Russia. Essentially, NATO and the former Soviet Union, and nobody else wants nukes. And then, if you look at nuclear weapon-free zones, then if you look at the equator, then south of the equator, there's just about everywhere except a few small islands south of the equator, then they are nuclear weapon-free zones. You can't have nukes in those countries. And then you have the stands, so that's a Persian word. All the stands except Afghanistan and Pakistan are in a nuclear weapon-free zone. So Kazakhstan and all those ones, also rather difficult to pronounce names if you're not from the area, all ended stan. And then there's the Mongolia, single country nuclear weapon-free zone. There's a South Asia nuclear weapon-free zone. There's the South America one, which is the entire South America plus Mexico. There's all of Africa is in a zone, absolutely the entirety of Africa, no exceptions whatsoever. They all are in nuclear weapon-free zones. So we're not really so far from eliminating all nukes as it seems. And again, United States and Russia, they sort of play this game where they sort of say, well look, we are going to want to eliminate nukes, but China won't join in. But they conveniently ignore this fact that every year China votes for a convention to rapidly remove all nukes quickly. And it's the United States, NATO countries and Russia that vote against that resolution every year. So the idea that China's the obstacle doesn't really make much sense. So, but China doesn't want to enter into a trilateral treaty where United States and Russia have far more nukes than China has. They all have to reduce nukes, and China has to disclose where its nukes are, because that makes it feel very vulnerable. So that's the problem with that. And once China and Russia, US and Russia, have greatly reduced their nukes to similar to what China has, then it'll be much easier for China to join in. But if United States and Russia and European countries would decide, oh well, we want to prohibit all nukes as quickly as possible too, then China already votes for that every year. So does India. And then probably other countries wouldn't be that difficult to get involved as well. So we're not as far away from a completely nuclear weapon-free world as you might think. There's just a few, it's mainly NATO and Russia that are the main obstacles, and Israel to that future. I'm not saying they haven't got good reasons, but if they can find a way out of that, the kind of hole they've got stuck in, then we can go to a nuclear weapon-free zone. And I'm just going to briefly mention, I'm going to do a longer video about this, a separate short video about this, but I just want to say, a lot of people completely misunderstand why United States and Russia have so many nukes. They think, misleading, and it's not true at all, they think they have the nukes because the aim is to try and kill everyone in the other country, which is impossible, actually. Nukes are just not nearly as powerful enough for that. But that's not why they have so many nukes. It would be an insane objective to have. To feel the only way that can deter you from invading our country is if I have the power to kill everyone in your country. That doesn't make sense at all. And that was never what it was about. So the background is that early on they had quite small numbers of nukes, they used them as deterrents, but then they had mainly land-based nukes. It was a while before they got to nuclear subs. And then with land-based nukes, each side, the Soviet Union and the United States, wanted to have enough nukes to destroy all the nukes on the other side. And that's why they started going up and up and up. So if one side had 100 nukes, the other side wanted 100 nukes, so they could had enough to destroy all those 100 nukes. And when it got to 1,000, the other side needed 1,000. And then they start saying, but 1,000 isn't enough, so we should have more on the other side. So they try and get 2,000. The other side goes to 2,000. They go to 10,000, 10,000, 35,000, 35,000. And that's how it got to so many nukes, just to try and equal the other side's nukes, because they felt vulnerable if the other side had more nukes. And they felt only safe if they had more nukes. And then it was under Reagan and Gorbachev that they then said, well, look, this is silly. We want to be able to. And actually, at that point, Reagan and Gorbachev, at one point, seriously, Gorbachev wanted to eliminate all nukes. They wanted to go to zero, not just reduce the nukes. And Reagan, for a significant period of time, he was very attracted by this idea as well. And then people were telling him, oh, they're not being serious, they can't be serious about this. He said, well, let's try them. Perhaps they are. If they are, then if they aren't, we'll soon discover. And they came very close to eliminating all nukes at the Reykjavik summit, and then they didn't succeed, and they both stormed out because they're both upset because they hadn't managed to eliminate all the nukes. So we actually came quite close in some ways to that happening. And then eventually we got the Glasnost and the reducing of the number of nukes. And so they greatly reduced them. There was, for a year or two, there was this possibility of totally eliminating the nukes. And that's a future that we can come to in the future as well. So we do have a possibility of a future without any nuclear weapons whatsoever. It's not pie in the sky, it is definitely practical, and at some point it may happen. There's a huge amount of wish for that in the world globally. So now I just want to talk here about, so this is just giving the broader perspective and the future and long term. So Hans Blix, he's very hard-nosed. He's a former nuclear weapons inspector, former head of the IAEA, and chair of the Weapons of Mass Destruction Commission today. And so he's not someone who's got his head in the sand. He knows all about nukes and things, or knows all about wars. He's been around inspecting nuclear weapons for the IAEA. And he says that despite the blips like the Gaza Strip and the Ukraine war, and he's been around for a long time, he knows his stuff, and it's not like clouds, pink fluffy clouds or anything like that. He says that the world is moving in the direction of less conflict, and he foresees a complete end to all wars. Now, I'm just coming at this with a slightly different perspective, just to, I'm very interested in astronomy and extraterrestrials and so on like that. Possibility of extraterrestrial civilizations in astronomical sense, not ETs, UFOs flying around with little green men, but I'm talking about distant civilizations around distant stars. I think there very probably are such, and maybe very far away, maybe even in remote galaxies. And but I think as a species, we're only going to be fully civilized once war ends. I think we're a very young species, and we're going very much in that direction, really rather quickly. Modern wars today, they are very precise weapons. It's largely the soldiers that are involved, that the civilians are much less affected than they were in the wars like a few decades ago, because we've got such precise weapons and also the law of war has changed. And certain things that were permitted in the past aren't permitted anymore. And we're moving more and more in that direction of less conflict. And Hans Blix, he foresees a future where there will be no wars anymore. Sorry, I've been talking a lot, and I think my throat has got a bit dry with all these short videos. So the century might end with us eventually, when you've got no wars anymore, then you don't need missiles. And we could scrap all or nearly all missiles. So this is a future that we'll still have competition like the Olympics, but why should competition involve killing people? Why should we kill each other? If you look at it in a imagine might well be that a couple of centuries from now, people look back to our times and look at us very much like we look at, say, the Stone Age or something. Think how primitive they were, that they had wars and they actually killed each other. And I think we'll only be fully civilized once we've got an end to war. And then when you think about that, imagine if the United States didn't have to have a defense budget. Then all these problems that Trump has, trying to save money here, there and everywhere, he would have massive amount of funding, and the universal health care would no longer be seen as being something that is expensive, because you no longer have defense. You no longer need to pay for defense. So I think it'll be a huge, what they call peace premium, when we get to eventually we no longer have any wars anymore. We're no longer building missiles. I'm using all that technology and all that knowledge, all that understanding for peaceful ends, and for protecting biodiversity, for renewables, maybe for going into space and exploring and mining and all sorts of things that we're doing, and no longer for making missiles. And our space telescopes would either be looking at the Earth because for reasons of protecting Earth, or they're looking out into space, instead of just looking at other countries to try and see what their weapons are doing. So I think it's not impossible this could happen even in my lifetime. So by if you go to the 2035, I'll be 80. If you go to 2040, I'll be 85. That is not so. That is not really so old nowadays. In the United Kingdom where I live, that's a kind of fairly reasonable, typical lifespan. So I might well live to that time anyway, and quite well possibly beyond that. And if I do, maybe that's enough time to see an end of wars. And I think it's certainly possible for the younger generation, people in your 20s, 30s, or so on. But by the time you're a bit older, and then certainly towards the end of this century, we might have a future without any wars anymore, and we might be working towards eliminating all missiles as well. So I think just take that broader perspective. It might help you be a bit less scared and think, well, it's less overwhelming if you think that, well, this is just a temporary phase we're going through when the war's going on in the world, and that in the future we very, very well may be coming to a future where all this stuff ends. It is not necessarily always going to be there. It's not as inevitable as it seems. So I have this video all about that. And yeah, that's it. That's the main thing I wanted to say. So I'll pop this video up here. And just remember that put that video up at the beginning. It's the most important thing. That there's a very strong will globally for a nuclear weapon-free Middle East, particularly. And if Israel can be persuaded somehow that it doesn't need its nukes anymore, then all the other countries in the region want that. And just about every country globally votes for that, and nobody votes against except Israel. So that might be in our future at some point. So anyway, this article, this blog post is in the video description, and then you've got if you go to the end of the description, it introduces to our fact-checking group, Doomsday Debunked, on Facebook, and you can join us for more help and to help other people there, and both as a fact-checker or helping people who are scared and just helping to reassure them and so on. So I'll upload this and add this to my short videos.